Robert E. Lee's our greatest general ever? I mean, are you sure about that? Do I have to break out the numbers? Oh, I'm going to break out the numbers. On average, Robert E. Lee lost 20% of his men in every engagement that he fought in, which was the highest of any other major general in the Confederate armies, including Hood, who was horrendously reckless with his men. For that, he only, on average, inflicted 15% casualties on the enemy. That's not exactly great. So much of a disparity that if he got 15% casualties to the 15%, like he could have had an extra 25,000 troops by the end of the war, which would have made a massive difference there in the siege of Petersburg. But he didn't. On top of all of that, Robert E. Lee had exactly 0 successful offensive campaigns. His best battle, the Battle of Chancellorsville, he lost 22% of his men versus the 13% on the Union side, gained no ground, didn't destroy or capture any significant portion of the Union army, and it was a colossal failure in Robert E. Lee's own minds. He himself said he lost too many men and gained absolutely nothing in that battle, but yet we praise him for it for reasons. On top of all of that, he had no interdepartment cooperations with the wars. He would not cooperate with the West. Multiple times, Trader President Davis said, please send troops from the East to the West, and Lee said, nah. When Lee was finally forced to send Longstreet right before the Battle of Chickamauga out to the Western Front, guess what happened? It was a massive success, and Longstreet helped defeat the Union at Chickamauga. But then Lee demanded Longstreet come back right away, which then meant that the South didn't have enough men for the Chattanooga siege, which then meant that the Union broke out of Chattanooga and damn near destroyed their army right then and there on the spot. So, way to go, Lee, and your grand strategy there. And speaking of grand strategy, he didn't have one. His whole grand strategy was, I'm going to defend Virginia at all costs and just hope that the North kind of gets sick of this and gives up. Didn't work out for you. Oh, but Lieutenant Tommy, if Robert E. Lee was that bad, then why did Abraham Lincoln ask him to be commander-in-chief of the entire Union forces? Because he didn't! That never happened! It's a lie! Robert E. Lee, in his own writing, said he never once had a conversation with Abraham Lincoln, never met Abraham Lincoln, never had a conversation with Stanton or Winfield Scott about being promoted to the head of the Union forces. In fact, the only conversation he ever said that he had with anybody was with a Francis Blair. Francis Blair is a journalist who occasionally acts as an aide to the White House as an advisor, but he maybe overheard a conversation with Lincoln and Winfield about Robert E. Lee, and he took it upon himself to go and have that conversation with Robert E. Lee without ever being directly asked to do that, on his own accord, without even officially on any kind of paper or document even acknowledging that this conversation was ever anything that was supposed to happen or did happen. And then because of that, he went down there to Robert E. Lee and asked him, hey, I think maybe Lincoln wants you. And then Robert E. Lee, 2 days later, goes up to Winfield Scott and says, I'm going to resign my post because I'm a dirty, rotten traitor and not that great of a general. Oh, by the way, Robert E. Lee lost as many battles as he won throughout the Civil War. So if you want a purely average general, have at it.